This is Psalm FM. I'm Greg Kaufman, and this is the second part of our three-part series of discussions with evangelist Rudy French. And for part two, we're going to hear Rudy's idea of what makes an ideal cross-cultural missionary and some things about Korean culture that might surprise you. So you've done cross-cultural ministry, quite a bit of it. What sort of personality lends itself to cross-cultural missions? Should people be looking for certain traits? Should certain people kind of eliminate themselves based on, I'm too shy, I'm too assertive, whatnot? What kind of person makes a good cross-cultural missionary?
Well, I would say it's a person that realizes that they're not, and I want to say this in a nice way. It's hard to say it in a nice way, that other people in the world are not inferior to you. That's just the way it is. I'll tell you a brief story that was really mind-boggling for me, and it kind of changed my mind about that, because all of us have pride. Whether we want to admit it or we don't want to admit it, we are prideful. And I was in Korea on a trip recently, and they had a feeding ministry, because in Korea everyone works. There's no such thing as welfare, Social Security, nothing like that. So you just work. So there's a lot of older people that are in their 80s that have little gardens, and they sell the vegetables, and it's a very difficult life. It's cold in Korea in the winter. So the churches have kind of a feeding ministry 6 days a week. Various churches take turns, and they feed as many as 170, 180 folks. And Pastor Jung asked my wife and I to go down there and help out with that ministry. And I thought we were just going for the one day that Heavenly Vision was sponsoring the meal. Well, it turned out he said, no, I want you to go there every day. Well, when you're going down there, what you're doing is just serving food and cleaning tables and mopping floors. Like, that's not what an evangelist does, right? I mean, that's work for a lackey. And it is, right?
Yeah. Well, that's something you'd do if you worked at a local chain restaurant.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not really having that much fun doing this. And I had to catch a local bus to get down there, and it was a big hassle to get down there every day, 6 days a week. We're doing that, along with everything else we're doing. Now, my wife loved it. She really did. And I was kind of not happy about it, but, I put on a smiley face and did what I was asked. And I was reading the Bible in the little mission apartment one night, and it came to the section, you remember, where the disciples came to Christ and said, who's going to be the greatest in your kingdom? And he said, the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is the servant. And I just thought, that's not me. And so I changed my attitude. I did. I said, Lord, I'm sorry. I'm not a servant. I didn't want to take that position. Because I thought I was higher than that. And I went back down there, and there was a gentleman that used to come in. He was 98 years old, and I was always giving him hot tea and stuff. He was always cold. And he was in a pain this one particular day because he had arthritis and so forth. And I just looked at him, and I just said, Apo, which means pain. Are you in pain? And he looked at me, he goes, Apo. And I looked at him, and I said, Kido, which means prayer. So basically, I'm asking him if he wants me to pray for him, for his pain. He says, De, which means yes. So I got on my knees on the concrete, and I started praying for him. And another young man, I'd never seen him before, it was a Korean man, who was a seminary student, happened to be there, or God put him there. And he came over, and he was praying. And anyway, he asked me, well, who are you? And I told him who I was. And he says, well, if you're an evangelist, what are you doing down here? I said, they asked me to come down here. And I said, but I have this little Bible tract called Steps to Peace with God. I'd like to read it to this gentleman. Would you help me? And that man, 98 years old, got saved because I became a servant. Mm-hmm. I'm convinced of that. If I hadn't been willing to go down there and take that position, God couldn't have used me. And we got to get over ourselves. And all of us are more full of pride than we think we are. If you go to another country and you ever use the term, those people, you're full of pride because they have names. And you ought to know what their name is. And you have a name. You want somebody to call you those people. So we got to get over that. And we have to put ourselves in their position and care about them. And we have to desire for them to be saved. We want them to go to heaven. And no matter who they are, they could be a drug addict, they could be a prostitute, they could be in all kinds of difficult situations, whatever it might be. But by the grace of God, that was you. All of us are sinners. All of us deserve to go to hell. And so we have to always struggle against that pride, I think. We have to be careful about that.
And that's who Jesus found himself interacting with, right? The publicans and the sinners.
That's exactly right.
And the prideful ones were the ones that came out and like, what on earth is he doing?
Right.
And they're talking to those people, as you put it. It is interesting that when we do things scripturally, how things just tend to go a little bit better for us. But on the subject of your ministry in Korea, is there anything about Korean culture that might surprise someone who isn't familiar with it? Because I find over here, a lot of people's interaction with Korean culture is just what they export. So their animation, their TV shows, their pop music, so BTS and Squid Game and such as this. So what about their culture might someone find to be a bit of a shock if they were just dropped into the country tomorrow?
Koreans are one people group. In other words, they're Korean. My son is married to a Korean woman. So my granddaughter is half Korean and half American. My son can never become a Korean citizen. It's impossible. Not allowed. You have to be Korean. So Koreans are family. It's one big family. It really is. For example, now you don't see it in the city because, they have, they're chasing the almighty dollar like everybody else is, and they're becoming westernized. But when you're in the countryside, if you're at a playground or something like that, and a child, say, falls off the swing, any Korean person can go over and pick that child up and comfort that child. And as we have served in Korea, after, I suppose, the 4th or 5th year that we were going over there, Pastor Jung told me, he said something about we were at a restaurant, and I said, can we get a fork? Because they eat with chopsticks. And he said, no, you not visitor, you Korean. You eat Korean style. So you become Korean, and they adopt you into their family. It really is a family. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And a lot of the things that Koreans are being exposed to, they're innocent of. For example, you might go to and hear Koreans playing some sort of music over here that we think of as being foul, and they may take that same music, rap music and things of that nature, and they'll have songs like K-pop and all that. And you see them dancing and you see all of that. But there's an innocence in Korea that we don't have in America. And it's troubling because they are being exposed to things that are corrupting their culture a little bit. Many of the things that are allowed in this country are not allowed in Korea. Koreans like to play golf. Here's an example. So if a Korean goes to, let's say, Thailand, and they play golf, when they come back, they have to take a drug test. If they fail the drug test, they go to jail. They don't have drugs with them, but they have to take a blood test. And if there's drugs in their system, they go to jail. There's no drugs in Korea. They're not allowed in Korea. They don't want anything to do with it. Abortion's not allowed in Korea. There's no such thing. They don't have it. It's not allowed. And so some of the evils that have invaded our culture are trying to make their way into Korea, but the Korean people and the Korean churches are really resisting it and struggling with it. And so, their culture is, and Koreans are brutally honest. If you don't want their opinion, don't ask, because they will tell you. I'm amused by someone that went with us one time, and the lady was a little on the heavy side and having a hard time because they do a lot of walking in Korea, and she's having a hard time keeping up. And so her translator told her, she said, next time you come Korea, maybe you don't be so fat. And they say things, they don't mean it to insult you. Mm-hmm. They're just brutally honest. They're kind of like children in their honesty. So it's interesting. Mm-hmm. I actually had heart surgery in Korea, and they're very advanced. The surgeon that performed the heart surgery, bypass surgery on me, was trained at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And instead of cutting my chest wide open, he went in underneath my ribs and cracked a rib, went in that way, and recovery was like 3 months versus, a year. They're very advanced, very, very studious. The education level in Korea is probably one of the top systems in the world. They go to school, they study. They go to what they call hagwons, which are after-school activities. And everyone plays music. Everyone plays a musical instrument. it's astounding. It really is. So it's it's a very high level culture. And from Christianity, when Billy Graham went there and they had the crusade where over 1 million Koreans got saved, I mean, they just took off with Christianity, and they're very devoted in their service. It's changing, unfortunately, a little bit, but the churches are still very fundamental. There's no big differences. Largest church is Presbyterian, followed by Methodist, then Baptist, maybe Pentecostal, but they all work together because they're all one family.
Tune in next Thursday for our third and final conversation with evangelist Rudy French in this series, when we'll discuss his experience as an author as well as his future plans for ministry. For Heartland Christian Broadcasters, I'm Greg Kaufman.